Hello, everybody. Raven here. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the series on twists. This is the fun one to me. It's also one that can be very difficult to get right. As I mentioned before, the author that's probably most well known for this is Dean Koontz. He does this all the time, and it's not every one of his books, but he's done it many ways, at different times, and both well and not so well. That's when you just completely change your genre, completely change everything that was going on, everything the story was about. Now, by that, I don't mean something like Sixth Sense, where you find out somebody's not what you thought they were. I'm talking about if you had something like Sixth Sense, where it's mostly horror, supernatural, and then all of a sudden you find out none of it was that. It was all some kind of sci-fi. The example I want to use is one that I have to say is never easy for me to use because I hate to ruin this. I hate to spoil it. But at the same time, it's just too good of an example of both what this is, but also what it can be used for. What the purpose of it can be. So let me say right now, I'm going to go into spoilers. And if you haven't read The Taking by Dean Koontz, I would suggest you read it first. Spoilers coming. Maybe you want to stop, read it, come back. But that's what we're going to get into. The Taking is set in a town up in the mountains. A little bit up on its own, away from everything else. And what happens in this story is all of a sudden, the weather just starts acting weird. Weird rain, weird storms, and connection with everything beyond their town is lost. They don't know what's going on. And you start having what at least appears to be alien invasions. They're coming, they're grabbing people, they're taking them out. People are missing, gone, have vanished. And this whole thing is just a group of people trying to figure out what's going on, trying to basically escape this. And it just, you never really know exactly what is being done. And some of it just seems a little too weird for sci-fi. You get to the end, and all of a sudden it's as though the invasion stops. Just no real clear reason. It just stops. And then you get to the reveal. Now here's the thing about Dean Koontz. One of the main things I would ridicule is something I'm going to talk about in another video sometime, which is the positives and negatives about when you want to create one of those most pleasant happy endings and when you want to create one of the most disturbing sad endings. Sometimes it can go a little far. Sometimes it can be a little careless. I might bring this up again with Dean Koontz when I do that. But right now I'll just say, in this, he takes what he normally does and it ends up working because it's necessary. You need it. It's that part where the riddle is solved. What happens is, after this is all done, after the story's complete, our main characters go off, kind of start a new life, and this new life, they kind of go off to the coast instead of being up in the mountains anymore. And there, things just seem really good, but something still disturbing your main character of what was going on. And then one day, they're just looking around and notice a Bible. And all of a sudden, all the pieces start falling into place. And they realize what they've witnessed was not an alien invasion. It was the Rapture. What's so clever about this, what I think was really neat, was this wasn't just another twist to pull a twist. This was almost like he took up a challenge. This was almost as though he was kind of making a point by that twist. And it's something people often ask is, how if this is going to happen, will it go without people realizing what's going on? How would we not know? And a lot of people who know about it kind of assume, oh, I'll know when it happens. Some people might get mistaken, but I've read about it, I'll know. But it was almost like this book was kind of stopping you and saying, will you? And then tricking you and showing you, maybe not. So there was more to it than just trying to surprise you. It was almost making a point. And all this extra summary of what happened, all this extra conclusion of the kind of things an author will do when they want a really pleasant ending, were kind of needed to reach the point where your character solves it. And so it was this twist that really made everything fit together. It made sense out of all of it. It made all of it work. So this was the kind of use of it that really fits. And that's the thing you gotta realize. You gotta remember, what's the point of it? What are you trying to do with this? Are you only trying to surprise them? Okay. But be careful this doesn't become your whole focus. This is something I've seen Dean Koontz do. There have been times I've read a book, came to that twist, and then it's like everything else, there wasn't much there. There wasn't much to it. The twist didn't do much to add to the story or take it further. It was just something there to surprise you. So there have been times it didn't work. This case it did. That's what you gotta watch for. But then the biggest thing in this, the thing that can be the most difficult, is, are you being consistent? Is there going to be anything earlier in the story that's going to contradict the twist you make at the end? You can have things that may contradict what you want the person to assume as they're reading it, but you can't contradict what you've got at the end. And even in that means you got to be careful in how these contradictions may come in, because you don't want to make it too obvious. It's good to have those hints in there, those clues. But you also don't want it to be to the point where anybody's going to figure this out. It's not going to surprise anyone, because then it's going to kind of defeat the point. In other kinds of twists, it's not as big of a deal on that. Still important, but thing is, when you're not changing the whole story, there's not as much to be concerned with, because you're not going to be contradicting much. When you do this, you're contradicting everything. So yeah, not a whole lot to say, because this is so different, and every time it's done should be very different. That it makes it so that really giving rules, giving guidelines, you can't do much, because of how this requires being very unique. So like I said, it's primarily two things. Make sure you're not going to do anything that contradicts what you're going to reveal at the end. And two, make sure this doesn't get you so focused on it alone that you leave out everything else of the book or story that matters. And then it's also good, not as necessary, but good to make sure there's an extra reason behind it. There's something more you're doing here than just surprising people. Not necessary, but always helps. We'll get to the next part of this series. For right now, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Some of you could have fun with this idea, with this concept. definitely be creative with it. Just make sure it doesn't get in the way of the rest. We'll see you guys next time. God bless.